Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Foundation Maps for U.S. Veterans and Military Families. My name is Amanda Dillon and I'm Manager of Knowledge Services at Foundation Center. I'll be moderating our conversation. First, a few housekeeping items. You can join the audio portion of the webinar by phone. The number is in the welcome box in the top right corner of your screen, or you can listen in using your computer speakers. All the attendees have been muted. Please post your questions in the Q&A box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen during the conversation, and we will answer those questions at the end. This webinar will be recorded, and we will post it on the Foundation Maps homepage, and also we will distribute it through the NAVSO and Council on Foundations channels as well. So with that, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Chris Ford is joining us on the webinar, and he currently serves as CEO of the National Association of Veteran Serving Organizations, or NAVSO for short. His leadership and passion have moved NAVSO to public launch in 2014 and have positioned the organization to fill the need for a national collaborative association for the nation's 40,000 plus veteran and military serving organizations. NAVSO serves as a trusted, neutral convener, stitching together like-minded public and private organizations seeking to deliver more effective and efficient services to veterans and military families where they need them most. He's also a 20-year Air Force veteran, retiring in 2014 from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, where he served in the Chairman's Office of Warrior and Family Support. In that role, he leveraged his perspectives on veteran reintegration to assist communities across 18 states. And he's also served in nearly a dozen countries around the globe, supporting several different veterans and military missions. I'd also like to introduce Stephanie Powers. She's Director for Policy and Partnership at the Council on Foundations. In this role, she manages the federal executive branch relationship in the Council's Department of Public Policy and Legal Affairs. Ms. Powers identifies opportunities to connect foundations and federal government agencies for mutual benefit and investment, leveraging, and she engages national organizations in Washington that help advance the mission of the Council and its members. The Council is also a membership organization, and its mission is to provide the opportunity, leadership, and tools needed by philanthropic organizations to expand, enhance, and sustain their ability to advance the common good. Prior to joining the Council, Ms. Powers was the CEO of the National Association of Workforce Boards, and prior to that held appointed positions for the Clinton administration's Departments of Education and Labor and the Employment and Training Administration. She's also held several county and state government positions. So Foundation Center is pleased to host both of these speakers today to speak about funding for U.S. veterans and military families. Established in 1956, Foundation Center is the leading source of information about philanthropy worldwide. Through data analysis and training, we connect people who want to change the world to the resources they need to succeed. Foundation Center also maintains the most comprehensive database on U.S. and increasingly global grant makers and their grants. We also operate research, education, and training programs designed to advance knowledge of philanthropy at every level. And thousands of people visit Foundation Center's website each day and are served in its 5 library learning centers and at more than 450 funding information network locations nationwide and around the world. So today we're going to be talking about Foundation Maps for veterans and military families. This data mapping tool was developed in partnership with the Council on Foundations in 2014 in response to Joining Forces, a White House initiative that successfully encouraged Americans to volunteer, secure commitments from corporations to hire veterans, and remove regulatory barriers faced by service members and their families. Focusing on foundations, the tool was designed to help those working on this issue area to unlock creative funding streams and develop new partnerships to fuel innovative and effective programming supporting U.S. active duty personnel, military families, and veterans. So with that background, let's begin our conversation with Chris Ford. Chris, thanks so much for being on today. I wanted to start off by asking you, how can those working on veterans issues benefit from using this tool?
Great question, Amanda, and thanks for setting this up today. More importantly, thank you and the Foundation for the great work you've done to put this tool together as a resource for everyone interested in helping veterans and military families. What we found with our network and the users that we have in our membership who are accessing this tool is it's a great way for them to quickly identify donors who already have a history of giving to causes much like their own in their region or geography. So if I do veteran homeless services and I'm in the Southeast, I can quickly use this amazing tool to filter down to the top 10 or top 20 donors who already have a history of giving to causes much like mine. And what this means for resource development professionals, instead of sending out letters of inquiries to every foundation they may come across, they can work more intentionally to build and cultivate relationships with donors who are already aligned in meeting missions and goals related to that particular organization as well. And so instead of this shotgun approach of trying to hit every potential funder with an opportunity and getting a very low return on those solicitations, they can just get really narrow and deep in building strong relationships with funders who already are in this space actively doing good work.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to switch over so that we can actually jump to the tool and show a couple examples that speak to what you just talked about. So right now you're looking at the main interface for Foundation Maps for U.S. veterans and military families. And so you can see right away how much data this mapping platform has. We have 23,559 grant records here, and the grants data goes back to 2003 and comes all the way forward to present. We have over $881 million given by 5,011 funders going to 2,512 nonprofit organizations in the United States. And so on screen, you're looking at red bubbles that represent where all the nonprofits who receive this funding are located. And you can click on any of these bubbles to pull up more details about that particular state. So you can see how many funders and recipients are based in Oregon, as well as how many grants and how many total dollars. And you can click around and do that for every bubble. You can also use this Showing Grants By button here up at the top to switch to look at where foundations are located around the U.S. who are supporting these causes. So you can see there's also quite an even distribution of foundations located across the United States who are supporting these issues. And in both cases, the size of the bubble represents the number of either foundations or nonprofits in that geography. So the larger the bubble, the more the foundations in this case. And again, you can click on any of these bubbles to pull up more details. So as Chris was mentioning, you can look really particularly at a specific geography to find out what foundations are supporting organizations in your area who serve U.S. veterans and military families. So you can use this location box here to type in anything, city, state, county, and a drop-down will appear that will show all of the recipients based in that state. So as you can see, these 4 boxes are dynamic and they update to reflect your criteria. So you can see we've narrowed down our search results, and now we're looking at $45 million given by 400 foundations to over 200 nonprofits located in Texas. And if you wanted to zoom in even more closely, say you were a nonprofit based in the Dallas area, you could click on one of these bubbles, and this pulls up information for Dallas County. And you can see that it shows specifically for Dallas how much funding is going to that area. So if we click on the foundations link here, we see the top 10 foundations that are supporting organizations based in Dallas County starting in the year 2003. And with any of these, you can see more details. So interestingly enough, the top funder for organizations based in Dallas is actually a community foundation based in California. You can see how much money they've given, and you can also see the total number of grants that they've given. So with any of these foundations, you can actually drill down and find out more information about that foundation. So in this case, I clicked on Communities Foundation of Texas. And right away, you see contact information, including address, telephone and fax number if we have it, email if we have a general contact, and also the website for the foundation. You can also see we have financial data for the last year, 2014 in this case, and it shows assets for the foundation, expenditures, and total giving per year, and the total grants amount that we have. So on this profile tab, you will see their mission statement, background information, and you can also see grant-making programs that they've specified. And a lot of this information is either pulled from the foundation's website or we derive it looking at the history of their grant-making. If we click on the Grants tab, we can see more specifically where and to who these foundations have given to in Dallas County. So you can see the recipient names here. You can also see the year of the grant here, and so you can see that we have records of the Community Foundation of Texas giving grants as far back as 2009. We also have some more recent grants data, so a grant from 2015. And then you can also see that these grants are listed in order of dollar value. So right now it's showing the largest grant given to an organization was in 2009. You can also click on any of these columns to actually sort, and that'll let you pull up more recent grants information. So we have several grants, as you can see, from 2005 going to organizations based in Dallas County. If you click on this details icon here, you will pull up a grants description. And so that'll show basic grants information, the total amount, the year awarded, the duration, and then, if possible, more details. The grant description will also be shown here. So for North Texas Giving Day 2014. And again, you can pull up any other grant descriptions, and it'll show you more details on that grant. So that's one way in which you can start to see what foundations might give to your organization based on your location. You can also browse our subject areas for this map, which are broken down into these two top-level categories. So first one is services for active military veterans, and then the other one is services for families. And you can see as you click down all of the various ways in which we've classified these grants. So everything from cultural and memorial activities to health to human services to legal services. And for some of these, there's even more granularity within the categories. So under cultural and memorial activities, we also have things like museum activities, veterans and war memorials. So if you click any of these, the grants data will be even further refined. And so if you were an organization who focused perhaps specifically on cultural and memorial activities, you could refine your search. And then you can click also on the list icon here on the left to pull up the top 10 foundations who are giving to support that type of work. You can also page through to see all of the different foundations who give to this issue area. So that's just one way in which you can explore the map to get at some of the data that might help you in your searches. Okay, so I'm going to turn it back to Chris. And as you can see, this is a great tool with good data. And I do encourage everyone to spend some time exploring it. So Chris, in your work with donors and NGOs seeking funding, what type of alignment or difference do you see between what NGOs are seeking funding to support and what donors are interested in funding? And how does this tool help inform both about the interest of the other?
Yeah, great question. You know, this is one of the main reasons we were so excited to embed this map into our portal for service providers, because up until that time, it was only viewable on the funder side in the Council on Foundations Veterans Philanthropy Exchange. So it was a tool that Stephanie will talk about that funders were using amongst themselves. But for the first time, we have service providers and funders in a very transparent way operating off the same information. And this is great. I think it's very healthy for the space so that organizations providing services have a clearer picture of who their potential funders are, and funders, to some extent, not only get to learn from each other, but can see potential grant recipients in a more transparent way by looking at their peers' investment. So it's been a great alignment of those two different groups, both seeking to affect positive changes for these populations. And the other thing that I've noticed in the way the tool is being used is that some of the nonprofit service providers are also using this to find likely partners, because they're like, wow, if that funder invested in us and we really believe in them and see what they do to support us, but we see they're also investing in these 3 other nonprofit service providers in our area, maybe we need to be partnering with them together so that holistically we can meet family needs. So that's really exciting as well. When you talk about the donor groups and how they might have differences, I like to look at donors into 4 different categories. First of all, there's the individual donors, which Phil Carter's recent paper on veteran-focused philanthropy shows that about 71% of the $335 billion invested in the most recent year recorded in this data came from individual donors. So the remaining 29% is coming from either estates, foundations, or corporations. And when you break those groups down specifically in the foundational side of community foundations, family foundations, or corporate foundations, here's my perspective and my experience. Obviously, Stephanie has a wealth of experience here that I do not, but in my limited 3 years working with this community, I find that most community-level foundations obviously are very locally focused. So I did see Greg offered a question in the Q&A, should he be looking at local funders? I would say yes, absolutely, because most foundations want their dollars to stay and have local impact because they've defined the geography around their impact goals. And I say that's most, not all. There are some exceptions. So you can look at this map to find those exceptions, especially if you look in your local community and see if there's any funders from outside of your community who happen to be offering money to grant recipients if you flip the model on the map. But what I do find is that, unfortunately, many communities at the community foundation level don't view veterans in their top 20 of issues. They're dealing with poverty issues, economic opportunity, other homelessness crisis, teen pregnancy, you name it, that really bubble to the top. So that's a tough group sometimes to harvest unless they're well invested, and many that are in the Council and Foundation are well invested in this work. Similarly, family foundations normally derive their pillars of giving historically from where the family foundation was set up. So if grandpa died of Alzheimer's, well, the foundation focuses on Alzheimer's solutions. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't court a relationship with them to say there are veterans with Alzheimer's and military families that have suffered from Alzheimer's. So maybe you can get a grant in that way, but it's usually hard to move a family foundation outside of their normal lanes of giving if veterans don't already exist within those pillars. But creative approaches can make this happen. And then lastly, the last group is really corporate foundations. And for many of them, especially if they're a national brand, again, to Greg's question, they are more inclined to give outside of their headquarters geography if they have a national footprint. But they're always going to view these in many cases as brand opportunities to ensure that they're aligning their big and powerful brand with the appropriate nonprofit and getting not only a return on investment of their dollars, but their brand is equally matched and not tarnished by making a poor investment. So you got to do a lot of research on the nonprofit side, but this is a great tool to help narrow down that research really quickly. We've actually had one of our members of our network who is a 8-figure organization annually say that not only is this tool a great addition to their toolkit, it has replaced all of their philanthropic focus efforts, and this is the only tool they're using to identify potential new foundational donors. So really a powerful tool.
Thanks, Chris. That was really helpful. So just as a reminder to our audience, we will take questions a bit later, but feel free to type them in at any point into the chat box. We can all see the questions, so as Greg saw, we can answer the questions on the fly. And now I want to turn to Stephanie. Stephanie, you were at the council when this map was first created for the Philanthropy Exchange. Can you speak a little bit about what the exchange is and what prompted the partnership between the Foundation Center and the council to develop this mapping tool?
Sure. Thanks very much, Amanda. And first, I would like to extend greetings to any council members who are on the call. I did spy some on your registration list that you sent to me, so welcome, and to others who are on the call as well, our colleagues in the nonprofit world. So this was kind of a good refresher for me, too, so thank you for going through the details of the map. I guess I could say unequivocally that the Council on Foundations loves the Foundation Center's tools. They really are just very substantive and very deep, and the philanthropy community, the funder community, uses Foundation Center for many, many things to understand what's going on among their peers and in our part of the sector. As you all know, knowledge is power, and Chris has pretty much, I think, kind of summed it up with some of his comments about what a powerful tool this is for veteran-serving nonprofits, in that, you know, one actually says, you know, we're going to let all the other stuff go. This is really a key way for us to focus our work on our development work. Just if I could just step back a little bit and answer your question. You know, the Council on Foundations is really deeply committed to engaging with our members and then other stakeholders, such as the nonprofit community, as well as our colleagues in government, in advancing effective strategies for serving America's veterans. The reason that I'm involved with this is that the Council has designated its Public Philanthropic Partnership Office, which I oversee in our Public Policy Department, as the home for philanthropic funder interests in veterans issues. So just a bit of background about how we got here, because being in the veteran space as a national philanthropic organization is rather unusual, actually, and somewhat unprecedented. There were two precipitating factors for us. In 2011, the Council was invited to participate in stakeholder discussions hosted by the Department of Veterans Affairs about how service members returning from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan could be successfully reintegrated back into their communities and civilian lives. Now, this was really a very seminal invitation for us. This engagement then with the VA had actually followed a call to action by Admiral Mike Mullen, who was then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who had keynoted the Council's annual conference in Denver in 2010, really putting out a call to action to the sea of goodwill out there to actually get involved and sort of stand up and be counted. So after these encounters, we looked more closely at the community reintegration needs of Iraq, Afghanistan veterans and their families as the national policy conversation really ramped up around the drawdown of the troops. At the same time, we were also engaged by a core of our members on these issues who were starting to respond as well. And a small group of them really became what I can consider our ad hoc Veterans Philanthropy Advisory Group. This was new territory for the council itself to be wading into. We appreciated the connections and the relationships that we started to build with people like Chris when he was at the Office of the Joint Chiefs, as well as our colleagues in the National Guard and at the VA. But this advisory group, Philanthropy Advisory Group, was a small group of funders that has hung together since that time, really, since 2012, to really help the council guide its efforts. This is an important group because they really were the genesis of this mapping tool. So at the time, the council really concluded that it had a role to play in responding to this national call, and we decided that our goal was to help our members understand the challenges being experienced by service members and their families as the wars were winding down and coming to an end. So we kind of envisioned that we would have a national community that could be supported by a technology platform, considering at the time, the effects of the economic recession were also hitting funders as well, the philanthropy community as well, in addition to the nonprofit community. Traveling to go to many meetings, to do face-to-face work really dropped off, and I think we all probably saw that with the government sequestration. So we decided that we would invest ourselves in a technology platform that would give us a way to kind of convene funders that were interested in veteran support, and that could provide a knowledge bank of relevant research and data that would be able to aid their development strategies and to begin to identify effective practices both on the program delivery side and public policy making, would give them access to juried experts and resources, and could continue to cultivate ongoing peer learning, which is very, very big in the funder community. So it was through the auspices of the Blue Shield of California Foundation in San Francisco and the Robert R. McCormick Foundation in Chicago that this tool was initially developed for our Veterans Philanthropy Exchange. Now, our Veterans Philanthropy Exchange was launched in May of 2014, and it's really a community of practice that is underpinned and supported by a technology platform that's really designed to gather high-value information and provide real-time communication among across philanthropic funders who are interested in this particular arena. Initially, the tool was posted and built for our platform, our Veterans Philanthropy Exchange platform, which is a closed community of funders. There probably are people on the telephone from the nonprofit community who reached out to me have reached out over the years asking, how can I get access to those funders? Can I belong to the Veterans Philanthropy Exchange? And that really is, and I've tried to be very tactful and kind about refusing, because we really have created a funder community so that funders can talk to each other and learn from each other and share their practices and investment strategies. So I think that this tool, though, it became evident that the mapping was really important, a really important tool for the nonprofits to begin to really understand who was funding and what arenas. And as Chris said, you could begin to identify where there was alignment between your work as a nonprofit veterans organization and funders. And it's really important to know, for those of you who've been trying to access philanthropic dollars and have gone through the grant-making processes, that foundations have, they've got their own procedures and their own process for applying for grants. Some are open and will accept letters of inquiry, others will not. How would you ever know that information? Well, that's what this tool can give you. By drilling down and going down several levels, as Amanda was showing everybody, you can get to sort of what the rules are of applying for grants from those particular organizations. So essentially, we have posted the mapping tool now is part of our Veterans Philanthropy Exchange electronic platform, part of our community. We work with the Foundation Center to continue to sort of grow the information in there. I think Amanda can tell you how that information is pooled, but and how they come up with all of that. But we now post it publicly for any funder to access as well, and any nonprofit that goes onto our website can also access the tool as well. So let me stop there, Amanda, and what else could I share?
Great, thanks, Stephanie. So based on your experience, and you spoke to this a little bit, but maybe you can get a little bit more specific about how this tool can help inform people's understanding about the kind of support going toward veterans issues, and how can both funders and grant seekers use it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's actually very important for us. Now, for us as a national association, we have a portfolio of work in which we educate members of Congress on the interests of philanthropy. And I was just recently at a meeting with the staff directors of both the minority and majority staff directors of both the House and the Senate Veterans Committees, in which this information was very helpful for me to carry to them, because the question that they ask is, well, how much philanthropy, what's the amount of money that's being invested by philanthropy? And so this gives us a bit of a guideline. It's not all of the money, of course, but certainly does represent a pretty significant investment within the sector itself. So it's useful for answering the questions is, what is philanthropy doing when it's coming to us, particularly from public policy side of the aisle? I think it's really useful for us inside the field to understand how we're doing, what's our barometer for success, kind of what's the baseline. As many on the phone may know, that the Council has been working to grow veterans philanthropy through the Veterans Philanthropy Exchange and the Joining Forces Impact Pledge, in which 36 foundations have publicly declared their investments and their commitments to support veterans and their families to the tune of almost $300 million. So for us inside the field, within the field, it's good for us to know what we're doing as a field, how are we doing as a field, so that when we get those questions, well, what is philanthropy doing? What are funders doing in this arena? We have a source, a credible source, through the Foundation Center's map and their process by which they gather that information, it's highly validated information, to answer those questions. So for us, well, I guess I should say for nonprofits then, I think for you, it is really useful for you to know who is in the space, where are they, to understand the lens that funders look at veterans issues. Some of it may not be quite as apparent. For those who are serving veterans and who are veterans may think that direct service is really what it's all about. And you'll find that philanthropy has an interesting lens at which it looks at issues. And some of this is around community engagement, knowing that there isn't enough money in philanthropy to provide the dollars for all the services that are needed. This is true not only in veterans, this is true in education and healthcare and energy development and climate change education, all kinds of things. But what we like to think of ourselves at are a private investment that can leverage a lot of other investments and other dollars. And so knowing who is funding in what arenas and the kind of interesting things that foundations actually are funding, I think is really important before you strike out and just start sending letters out asking for money to support your work. I always say to nonprofits who ask me, well, how do I get money from foundations? Well, I say the first thing is on the first call to them, never ask for money. ask for their advice, ask for their input, ask for their ideas. And it's about building relationships. While you may have the information about the money and what they do grant, foundations want to know more deeply about the work that you're doing and what kind of impact can be achieved by the work that you are doing, and how can you leverage the other work that the foundation wants to do in order for it to meet its missions. Foundations have a mission just like any nonprofit has a mission to do something.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much, Stephanie. So now I'm actually going to turn back to the map to give another brief demo to illustrate a few more ways that both funders and nonprofits can use the tool to increase their understanding of support going toward this issue. So if we jump back here to the map, and I'm going to clear all my selections so we get back to this view. So as I was showing a little bit before, you can filter your searches by location. You can also filter it by subject. So we were looking a little bit before about all of the categories that fall below services for active military veterans. We can also take a look at services for families. So what is comprised under that category? There's education, so education for early childhood, educational support services, higher education, and then maybe more broadly K through 12. There's human services, domestic violence prevention and services, so human services, general and other, marriage and family counseling. So all of these are categories for which we have data under. And I'm going to click marriage and family counseling just so you can see how that shakes out with the data. But all of these categories were actually put together with experts from both foundations that support these issue areas, also with the Council on Foundations, and the two foundations that Stephanie mentioned who supported this map, the McCormick Foundation and Blue Shield California. So you can see, even as granular as marriage and family counseling, we have data from several states across the United States. There's also more filters. So we have population served here. And again, this is a custom taxonomy, so we're looking specifically at the types of population that are usually served by funding for veterans and military families. So we have aging, elderly, and senior citizens, children and youth, economically disadvantaged, people with disabilities, substance abusers, women and girls. So if you're a foundation who supports any of these populations with their funding, what you could do is you could find out who your possible collaborators and partners are. So for example, if you're a foundation that supports people with disabilities, you could click here and you can basically see that there are 224 other foundations who we have records of their grant making supporting these people with disabilities. And if you wanted to see the list of who those foundations are, that list would shake out here, and so you can see that these are the top 10 foundations in support of people with disabilities. And actually, I'm going to pause my demo briefly so that Stephanie, who is really actually part of the process about how the taxonomy for this portal was developed, how she can speak a little bit about more of what that process was like.
Yeah, sure. So this was part of of course, the development work that we did, that I did with one of your research directors at the Foundation Center, where we sat down and really began to take a look at what you already had, what the Foundation Center had for a taxonomy in its kind of more general grant-making maps and lists. And then we overlaid on that things that we thought were very specific to the veteran service member and military family community. And so I will say that the education that I have had in the years ensuing or previous to the development of the map, those first couple of years, in lots of the conversations that certainly I'd begun to really understand what the real key areas of service needs were and support. And again, I think as I mentioned, we were looking a lot at, and I was listening to lots of our colleagues in the government and veterans organizations as well about the very specific needs of this particular population of Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. I will say there was another slice of this that was kind of new for us too, and that was information that we were able to garner from our colleagues and friends at the National Guard. Because the National Guard was deployed in, almost 1 million National Guards people who were deployed to the war zones and in multiple times for many of them, added an interesting sort of community-based element to this conversation that may not have been present before. Because the National Guard was called up, lots and lots of communities that don't have an identification as a military community where there is a base, for instance, and a population, a denser concentrated population. So it really, began to push us more into thinking about the broader sort of community service strategies that were needed to serve veterans and to help veterans with their reintegration and families with reintegration after these wars. And so that's really how we kind of came together and decided on the taxonomy. I think that the taxonomy is certainly flexible. If there are areas and needs that are not being covered in there, I'm sure that, your shop, Amanda, would be willing to entertain, adjusting and modifying the taxonomy to maybe add in some new elements that, maybe have emerged now in these last couple of years.
Yeah, I think that there's always the room to kind of make the taxonomies more robust. So we can definitely consider something like that for the future. So thank you for explaining that in more close or more in depth, Stephanie. So just quickly to kind of finish this example. So if you were a funder who were supporting people with disabilities within the U.S. Veterans and Military Families framework, you could take a look at this list and see who might be, a natural collaborator. You can filter over here and actually say, well, I don't give grants, that are actually bigger than $10,000. So maybe I just want to see a list of all of the foundations who are giving smaller grants, because that would be more reflective of my cohort. So there's different ways really that you can use to slice and dice the data using these different filters, and that can help you really refine the results. You might also take a look at, which foundations are supporting people with disabilities, but perhaps at the advocacy and public policy lens, and you would see the list changes here. You could also take a look at, well, if I'm looking to expand my portfolio and figure out who are organizations that are working on policy issues in the disability space, who could I support? And so you could look at the recipient list in that way and say, okay, these are the organizations who are working in these areas. And in a way, this list has already been vetted by some of your peers, because these recipients come up because basically one of the foundations in this database has given a grant to them. And so, for example, here we see, the Harry and Jeanette Weinberg Foundation gave a grant to the National Alliance on Mental Illness. in 2014, and so you could take a look even more closely again at what the grant description was for. So there's several different ways that you can use the criteria up here to slice and dice the data to look for both peer funders and also potential new grantees, or perhaps even to explore if you have grantees in this database, what other foundations are giving to them. So it's a great place to collect some of that initial information. So I mean, that's all to say that there's just no debate that we live in an era of big data. And what's great is that technology helps us to gain access to the type of data we have been talking about. And before we turn to the questions from the audience, which we've tried to answer, I think, as much as we can as we've been going along, I'd like you, Stephanie and Chris, to comment on how these mapping tools can complement other sources of information that funders have and use to inform their grant making, and that nonprofits use to inform their fundraising and programming. And I know you've both already spoken a little bit to that, but maybe you can, go into that again. And audience members, please feel free to type your questions in if you have any lingering questions or thoughts as Chris and Stephanie give their final thoughts. So let's start with you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. As we've already articulated, this is a great tool in the toolkit, and it may actually supplement some of the other tools that organizations are using. Two observations that we've seen this year. One, demand for services is up and supply is down. This seems to be consistent when you compare the first quarter of 2016 with the first quarter of 2015 across multiple sectors across the country. So in the veteran nonprofit services arena, more people are seeking services, and the number of organizations servicing them is on the decline in the last 5 years, and the amount of money invested in them is on the decline. So that leads me to my number one point to all nonprofits. If you provide amazing programs and services that you are measuring outcomes and not just outputs, the money will come. If instead you are struggling to grab money while trying to figure out what you're going to offer the veterans and military families who need you, you're going to have a really difficult time here. Stephanie made this comment earlier. It's about relationships, but it's about impact. If you're a high-performing organization that is investing so much of your time into quality programs, service development, and delivery, the money will eventually come. And you may need to, block off time in your calendar to use tools like this to really figure out where you're going to start getting more investment from. The other piece I would give you is don't start big with organizations. As Stephanie mentioned, it's a relationship. So even though you know that they have hundreds of millions of dollars in their coffers, that first check may be $5,000, but that could lead to a great relationship over the next year where they're really happy with what they received out of that $5,000, and next year it's 20, and then 50, and 100. So you don't have to go big the first time. Build a relationship. Give them something to feel great about by providing high-quality services, and you'll find it much easier to build a sustainable business model serving veterans and military families that just happens to have a tax advantage. We call them nonprofits.
Okay, great. And Stephanie, final thoughts from you.
Sure. So I think it's important for nonprofits to understand that foundation funding, applying for foundation funding, is not like applying for a government grant. Typically, foundations don't issue big RFPs and have big competitions. Now, typically they don't do that. There are almost 700 community foundations across the country that really are very focused on their community, their region, their city, their metro area, their rural area. And they really go to great pains to understand what is needed in those communities. These are important foundations to build relationships with. They're looking for where the gaps are, what are the needs in communities. And so tying your particular service, your particular passion, your mission as a nonprofit organization to what the community's need is actually probably a pretty smart exercise. if you're going to reach out to a regional foundation like a community foundation or a family foundation. So remember that. This isn't just like applying for a government grant. I always tell people to scour the websites of the foundations before you make the first call. Really take a look at their websites. Get a feel for what's really happening. What they're putting on their website, that is a clue for what they think is important. Get real-time information. Check out any press releases that they've recently released, any activities that they've hosted in the community. Get a feel for what the mission is of the organization. If you are you're into canine support dogs, let's just say, or animals, comfort animals, you may not want to go to apply at a foundation that is very, primarily focused on, disaster or philanthropy. Now, there may be some tie-in, but you get what I'm saying. Head to the foundations where what you're doing really kind of comports and fits with their mission. So understand their overall priorities and take a look at their current grant making. Most foundations put, their more recent grants on. I think it's one thing that the grants that are in the Foundation Center map are, I think, a year old at least. So grants usually are released maybe quarterly. There are quarterly grants for many foundations, and they may just post those right on their website. So stay in touch that way. Another thing I would also say is really understand who is on the boards of foundations and see what their interests are and what sectors that they also represent, because it's just important to know if there are lots of corporate leaders that are on a board, or if there is a veteran on the board. Those kinds of things are really important, I think, to know as you're writing and becoming more familiar, trying to get more familiar, sort of getting inside the skin of that particular foundation.
Okay, wonderful. So now we're going to turn to a couple questions that came up along the way that we haven't answered. And I'm just going to actually repeat a couple of the ones that we did answer, but that maybe not everybody caught. So one from Jessica in the audience is, how do I access the foundation map? Is there a cost to do this? So this map is actually freely available. It is on the Philanthropy Exchange, which I believe is behind a firewall, but it is on the NAVSO website. And so as you can see, the links to the website of the three organizations are on screen right now. You can also access this map on Foundation Center's website, so there's no cost to access it. I think another question that came up from Lisa in the audience is the information about who grantees are collected from the funders. So it depends on the information. In terms of the address information, Foundation Center actually has something called a recipient authority file, in which we have, I believe, close to 400,000 nonprofit organizations listed in it. And we are responsible for updating information in it, so everything from the name of the organization to the address to their website to their email address if we have it. What foundations will provide to us are the list of grants being given to those nonprofit organizations. And sometimes through the information foundations give us, we will update our information on the recipients. So that's where information about grantees is from.
Amanda, this is Stephanie. Can I just correct? I believe that you can. We've now posted a link to the map under our agreement with you all. That's actually on our Veterans Initiative page on our website. So that particular, there's a particular icon there that now is available for public consumption.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you for correcting me, Stephanie. Okay, there's another question that I'm actually going to pose to Chris. Is the focus only post 9/11 veterans or families, or is there a way to find resources to support programs for the aging Vietnam veteran population?
Yeah, great question. Obviously, this data dates back about 13 years, but it reflects investment in all generational missions. So the dollars that are reflected in here are aimed towards military and veteran causes, but they're not just solely focused on post 9/11 veteran services. So if there's investments into legacy organizations that are investing in multi-generational services, those are also reflected in this data as well.
Great, wonderful. And someone else, Ronald, asked more of a nuts and bolts question about saving the list for youth. And in this particular iteration of the Veterans Map, there is no ability to save the data or list, but we are in the process of enhancing the map, and I think in the next version there might be the ability to save lists, so not yet. And then finally, another question from Cheryl. Are there other maps that can be accessed at no charge, for example, for children's causes? So Foundation Center does make a few of its other issue-based maps available to the public. Those can be found on our Foundation Center website. That'll link, if you go to Knowledge Services, the page for Knowledge Services, you'll find a little bit varied with a list of all of our other foundation maps that are free. And we also do have a subscription-based service for the whole entire database and Foundation Maps platform, and more information can be found out about that at our maps.foundationcenter.org link. And then finally, we do have, as I mentioned at the beginning, a network of over 450 organizations around the world who provide our data and services for free, and that information can also be found on our website. So with just a couple minutes left in our webinar, I wanted to pause and just allow any closing comments from our speakers. So let's start with you again, Chris.
Well, again, thank you so much for putting this together. This is a really amazing tool, and we're so excited to be able to share this with our network. For anyone who's on the nonprofit service side, we encourage you to use our portal to not only find this resource, but there's a plethora of other resources we have. They're all aimed at helping you be more effective and efficient with every dollar and every minute. So please check us out and take advantage of this great resource. It's updated all the time, and look for some enhancements, as Amanda mentioned, later this summer that will add some new attributes to this tool that will make it even more powerful for your use. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you, Chris. And Stephanie?
Yes. So I guess I would end by saying for our friends in the nonprofit world, you're more than welcome to contact me. I'm not going to help you actually do the fundraising, but I'm always very eager to help you understand how to work with foundations and how to approach them, and to figure out really how to build that relationship, because it's the relationship that really is very important for the long haul. So thanks, Amanda, very much for giving us the opportunity to, to share this great tool, and really have to give a lot of kudos to the Blue Shield of California Foundation and Robert R. McCormick Foundation, Peter Long, who is the CEO at Blue Shield, and Don Cook at McCormick Foundation for their vision and their willingness to really financially underwrite the development of this really great tool.
Wonderful. Well, once again, I want to thank our speakers, Chris Ford of NAVSO and Stephanie Powers, the Council on Foundations, for joining this discussion about the powerful mapping tool that really provides a wealth of information about funding for veterans issues. And please be sure to visit our website to learn more about our work to promote robust and effective philanthropy and to benefit the veteran communities. Thank you very much.